the innovator in me says, well, surely we should be continuing to drive the bounds of what we can and to make sure that we have the greatest capabilities available.
Of course.
We then need to make sure that we have the relevant ethical frameworks, because should we innovate? Yes. The pragmatist in me says, just because we can
doesn't mean we should.
Should we?
Yeah. Welcome back to the Tech Leaders Podcast. And today I'm coming to you from Tobacco Dock in London, right in the heart of London Tech Week. The AI Summit is absolutely buzzing this year. And it's no surprise, really, given the explosion of interest and the sheer pace of innovation we're seeing in this space right now. Now, some of you may remember that Matt Armstrong-Barnes joined us on the podcast around 6 months ago. Back then, he was the CTO for AI at HP Enterprise. But a lot's happened since then. Matt has now taken on an exciting new role, which we talk about. Plus, he's an ambassador for the AI Summit. So we are thrilled to catch up with him once again. And in this episode, we dig into what this next chapter means for him, what makes this AI Summit feel different, and how enterprise organizations should be thinking about AI, not just in terms of adoption, but in terms of governance, automation, and the way they manage IT assets, amongst other things. We also touch upon agentic AI, some of the real risks that are emerging at the edge of this technology, and what responsible leadership looks like in this new era. I really hope you enjoy it. It's a fabulous conversation. It's Matt Armstrong-Barnes. Matt, I'm so excited to talk to you today at such an enormous moment, really. This AI Summit it's come at the perfect time. There's so much going on right now. But before we go into that, obviously some big news from you.
Yes.
Tell the listeners what's going on in your life right now.
Yes, I've had a bit of a role change, a bit of a job change, to be fair. So I've left Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, where I was CTO for AI since 2017, and I've joined an organization called Servita. So Servita have been doing digital transformation for the past decade or more. And obviously in digital transformation, they're doing more and more in the AI space. So I've come on board to enhance and embrace what Servita are doing already as their global AI practice director.
Wow, fantastic. Well, that sounds really exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of Servita and just go into a bit more detail about what sort of markets they have served up until now and what your goals are in your new role?
Yeah, so Servita been around for more than 10 years, covering mainly UK, Ireland, Middle East and Asia Pacific, and have been heavily focused on digital transformation, focused at driving customer outcomes. So if it's complex transformation with all manner of moving parts, including AI, then absolutely a go-to partner to achieve that. And what I'm doing really is helping Servita to grow in their AI portfolio, bring together all of the moving parts. And ultimately, my goal is to work with our existing customer base to help them understand how to be successful to go on the digital transformation journey with significant AI components into that.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking earlier just off camera about some organizations who maybe have been traditionally behind the curve with the digital transformation. They now have an opportunity to potentially steal a march on everyone else by being AI first from the outset. Are you seeing that pattern? Are you seeing quite a progressive, or maybe are you seeing interest from organizations who have maybe been a bit slower with their digital transformation journey?
So I think when it comes to sort of going on this journey, AI is moving so fast that the key thing is to get started. So there have been some organizations who've been much more in the experimental phase, sort of learning, it's living in a laboratory, and really they need help from an organization like Servita to help them get to the point of actually how's it going to result in real business benefits. You know, you need the engineering discipline associated with that, tried and tested mechanisms to get you through that process.
Yeah.
If you have done some digital transformation and it doesn't have any AI componentry on it, then it's worth going back and thinking about how it can start to add value in, which means that you need to start thinking about strategically what's it going to look like. Some organizations have been a bit piecemeal So they've done sort of specific use cases on their digital transformation journey, but haven't really had a consistent approach to how they've built them together, which has resulted in multiple tech stacks and are slightly disjointed. And now they're having to go back and reapply some thinking on how to consolidate it all together to give them a consistent platform. For any organization that has gone through the digital transformation journey, because it is really a journey, you never really get to the end of it.
It's not a destination, is it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is about making sure that if you have got some AI deployed, then perhaps you can start thinking about generative AI techniques, or if you're very mature, how you can start looking at agentic approaches, which is multiple algorithms working together to drive a more decision-oriented outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's maybe dip into that a little bit then. So in terms of organizations who are mature enough to really benefit from agentic AI and generative AI more broadly, where do organizations need to be? What do you need to have in place to really adopt and implement and adopt AI quickly?
So one of the things that we do at Servita is we have a maturity assessment where we can take you through and identify where you are on the AI maturity curve.
We call it a readiness assessment, but it's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
Health check, all of those kind of good things. And when it comes to making sure that anything you're going to do with Gen AI or agentic AI, you do need a good, solid foundation data.
Sure.
Because as with an algorithmically driven approach, namely AIs can make bad decisions if they're given bad data. Exactly the same is true with generative AI and agentic AI. So when it comes to understanding the baseline that you've got, if you've gone through a good, mature digital transformation and you've built some strategy around what you're doing with your data, who owns it, how do you make sure it is of quality? Have you driven a data-driven first agenda into your organization? If that's the case, you've got a very good starting point.
Yeah.
If you've got some AI deployed, and you've done it in a strategic way that is driving an outcome, you may well have many of the foundational stages that you need to put in place. And then it's a case of being able to deploy more Gen AI or agentic use cases on top.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's the biggest mistake you normally see, Matt? What do organizations get wrong when trying to adopt and implement AI applications?
I think I'd probably categorize it in a number of areas. So number one, not tackling a real business problem.
Just on that point, do you mean, and I see a lot of this, implementing AI for the sake of it?
Absolutely.
Because it's on trend. I know that's a little bit, I'm being a bit silly with that, but you know what I mean? Focusing on having AI in your estate as opposed to solving a specific problem and using that as an enabler.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, so AI in a lab is great if you want to want to use it as a learning vehicle to understand how the technology works.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But if you create
because you've got to get that ball rolling, haven't you, somehow?
Yes. Skills is a massive problem, faced around the world.
Yeah.
So if you create something in a laboratory that isn't related to a real business problem, you're not going to create it using real business data. And as a result of that, when you put it out there into the wild, a lot of times there is a significant difference in the type, quality, distribution of the data that you've got, which means your algorithms don't perform very well.
Of course.
If you start off with a real business problem, backed by a proper business case, then start to work backwards into what data have you got to support it and have a look through that lens, then absolutely you're going to be successful.
Absolutely.
Other areas where I see organizations kind of getting it wrong, the manifestation of building things in a lab is lack of governance. So if you have too little governance, you're going to end up with loads of AI initiatives sparking up all over the place without some consistency of approach, different techniques, different tech stacks, a whole variety of challenges underpinning that.
Yeah.
If you swing the other way and you put too much governance in place, you're not going to do anything.
Yeah.
So it's getting the fine balance.
You're putting the cart before the horse a little bit then, aren't you? And
absolutely.
Funnily enough, you do see that, don't you? I mean, we're talking about AI and legislating for AI in your organization, but not actually doing anything with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that as being I also see the ideation utopia, which is
I like that. Yeah.
What can we do with this? What can we do with generative AI? What can we do with AI? And I've literally spoken to organizations. They go, the worst I've heard is 700 use cases. And I was like, awesome.
Yeah.
Do you know what data in your organization will support any one of those use cases? No.
Yeah.
Right, okay, well, you need to choose a smaller number of use cases, focus in and work out the data that is going to support them. The next set of challenges are, if you're going to do anything, in a modern organization, you want to be able to understand whether or not it achieves the things that you thought it was going to achieve.
Yeah.
Which means you need to measure it. If you're going to measure something, it has to be repeatable. And in order for something to be repeatable, you really need it to be automated. So as a result, putting these capabilities in place that allow you to drive that means you start off with a real business benefit. You can wrap some metrics around that you can then track. You can go through your AI initiatives with proof of value. You can compare that proof of value against what you want to achieve from a business case perspective. And if the two align, brilliant. That is an AI initiative.
Yeah, sure.
And I think one of the other challenges I see is everyone who's trying to crack an AI or a problem with an AI hammer. AI is absolutely excellent at a specific number of things. It's probabilistic mathematics. So it's great at classification, clustering, and regression.
Yeah.
Generative AI is great at creating digital assets. If you're trying to tackle one of or any of those type of problems, brilliant. AI is the tool that you should be looking to tackle that.
Yeah, sure.
And if I give you a very quick definition of the difference between AI and generative AI.
Please do.
So AI is around using an algorithmically driven technique to find hidden patterns in data.
Yeah.
Generative AI is around the creation of digital assets.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard it framed like that before, but yeah.
We are seeing the two coming together.
Yeah.
In the form of things like retrieval augmented generation and agentic AI, and which is the formation of the two. How do I find hidden patterns in data and then be able to create digital assets from those hidden patterns?
Of course, yeah.
But if you think about them as AI tackles one set of problems, Gen AI tackles a different set of problems. But when those problems overlap in the Venn diagram, that's when you bring the two techniques together.
It brings a whole new meaning to the old adage of the devil's in the detail, doesn't it?
Yes,
the devil in this case is in the data. That's where the assets get created. It's all about your data.
Oh, absolutely.
But people have been saying for years, data is the new gold and things like that, or the new oil or whatever. But, I don't think it's really got realized as much as this, is it? How well you've tracked, stored, and kept your data in good condition is really coming home to roost, isn't it? You reap what you sow, and I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. The quality of your data is essentially the effectiveness of your AI capability. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know where data is the new oil comes from. And I believe it comes from
You're going to tell me that's one of yours?
Yeah. No, sadly, I can't lay claim to that. It's a famous British mathematician called Sir Clive Humby. And he did not mean oil is of value and data is of value. What he actually meant was...
okay, that's interesting. That's what I thought he meant.
Yeah, there are similar properties. So data is like a liquid. So, and what that means is it changes shape. And just because I found a well, and by finding a well, I went to it, I did some planning, I built an oil rig, I drilled down to the oil, I extracted it, I got it from the rig to the refinery, and then I used the refinery to turn it into something that is useful.
Okay, yeah.
If I find another well, I still need to get the oil via a process to the refinery.
Of course.
And because it is like a liquid, it is changing shape. If I find one well, it'll be shaped in one way. If I find another well, it'll be shaped in another way.
Sure.
So there's some commonality of approach, but I do need to think about it slightly differently.
That's interesting. So that's where the saying comes from. Is
yes.
Yeah, I didn't know the context. You just see the headline and use and steal the saying, don't you? Well, in my case, but that's really interesting.
Where I think his analogy starts to break down, because I think he made it like 20 years ago or something. He's a very, very visionary mathematician. Is where data and oil, the synergy breaks down. We have an infinite amount of data. And we can transform it in any way that we can think of from our imaginations.
Sure.
So if we think about the two together, but then also where it breaks down, we can do absolutely whatever we want as long as we have the right data in the right shape, and we can successfully get it from where we found it through an extraction process into a refinery, a transformation. And then once we've got it from our refinery, we then need to get it to the consumers where they can make best use of it.
Yeah, I think one thing I've noticed from commercial large language models like OpenAI's and Grok and stuff is when ChatGPT first burst onto the scene in sort of late 2022, it was based on data. It was trained up to sort of a year before you were actually writing your queries.
Yeah.
So the output was kind of out of date a lot of the time. But it seems now that all the models are completely up. I mean, if you put something into Grok about something that happened yesterday, you still get, it's trained on data in real time. You know what I mean? So that seems a bit of a big step forward that's happened in the last couple of years.
So I think if you were to ask your favorite language model of choice when its training cutoff point was, its training cutoff point will be historic. But
so there's always a cutoff point. It's not an ongoing sort of thing then, is it?
So from an industry's perspective, what we're seeing is how I bring generative AI techniques together with AI techniques.
Yeah.
And the big one that's kind of captured everyone's imagination is something called retrieval augmented generation.
Okay. Yeah.
So retrieval augmented generation is, how do I take my data without training it into the neural network to come together? Because training neural networks is incredibly compute intensive.
Yeah, sure.
So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to take an algorithm, a large language model, without fine-tuning it or understanding how the language model works, but take my data and being able to interact with it. Sure. If I give you an analogy of kind of how that works.
Yeah.
Imagine I want to have a conversational relationship. So I ask a question, the language model understands the language I've asked the question in.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it also understands the language of my data because I've taken my data and I've put it into a knowledge store.
Sure.
So the knowledge store doesn't speak a language. So the language model provides this translation. It asks the knowledge store and the knowledge store returns a response, which then comes back to me. So what the language model is doing is really understanding language.
Yeah.
And translating that for a knowledge store.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. So I understand. I think to a certain point.
The next level of data, the sort of detail behind that is I take my data and I put it into a vector database.
Sure.
So this is a multi-dimensional space where I can group concepts close together.
Gotcha.
And, this is mathematical representations. So my language model can understand my vector space, how I've stored all of my knowledge together.
Yeah, sure.
But because it's stored in this vector database, my knowledge store, it can actually hold links back to the original data.
Sure.
So one of the things that you start to alleviate is something called hallucination.
Which is still happening, isn't it?
But if you use RAG, retrieval augmented generation, because it's coming from my knowledge store, which is underpinned by my data, I can actually go back via a hyperlink. So if it returns its response back, it'll have a hyperlink in there, which I can click and it'll take me to the paragraph in my data in a document somewhere.
Oh, right.
It'll support
so it'll
that argument.
It'll footnote it like an academic paper for it sort of thing. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, yeah. I didn't know that.
And the vector space is created by AI because that's about finding hidden patterns in data.
Yeah, sure.
So this is the latest trend. And obviously we're moving much more into like agentic retrieval augmented generation and how we have multiple agents and multiple agent collaboration. Some of those things are the future. However, if we start talking about retrieval augmented generation, if my data isn't very good, so I'm putting in low quality documentation or things that are inaccurate or old into my vector store, then my retrieval augmented generation implementation doesn't understand that. So it's still going to return what it thinks is accurate data to you, even though it might not be accurate.
Yeah. I was listening to Geoffrey Hinton talk recently on a YouTube video or something. He was getting interviewed by CNN or something. And he was talking about how it's still a bit of a black box in terms of what goes on in the neural network stage. You put the query in, there's a black box and what comes out. We don't fully understand what's going on in there. That's crazy, isn't it? But yeah, can you maybe break that down in terms of exactly what he means? What do we not actually understand?
So if we take the concept of artificial intelligence, big general term, then we go machine learning. There are lots and lots of machine learning techniques.
Yeah.
Right the way through from if you've got an XY coordinates and you've got a load of X's on it and you get an automatic line drawn through it, that is a form of machine learning because I didn't actually explicitly program it how to draw the line. I showed it lots of examples and it worked the rest out itself.
Right, yeah.
So that's machine learning. But that's really simple. The more complicated you get in terms of the complexity curve, you go up through support vector machines, random forests, a whole bunch of different techniques up to artificial neural networks. So artificial neural networks and generative pre-trained transformers, GPT, which are the most complex implementation of artificial neural networks.
Of course.
We have.
And that's where large language models come from, basically. Yeah.
Billions of parameters.
Of course, yeah.
And all we really know is that we put a query in and something comes out.
That just blows my mind.
Because
it's like,
it's traversing through hundreds of millions, billions of pathways.
But what I mean, Matt, is that if we're talking about biology, like fair enough. We're talking about technology that we created, and we don't fully understand what we've created. This is crazy, isn't it? It's just bizarre. I'd never heard that before. But
and I think if anything, it's getting worse because we're building larger and larger models, and we are heading towards. There's something called catastrophic forgetting and model collapse, and we're getting to the point now where if we start feeding in more and more into these models, because we don't really understand how they work. We actually start to change the distribution inside the neural network, and they start to spit out complete rubbish. So we start, we are we at the edge of where we can go with large language models? A big debate for academics, and obviously we're seeing some great institutions who continue to drive the evolutions on that. We are kind of pushing the bounds and getting ourselves into an area where we don't actually fully understand how the algorithms produce the outcomes that they do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have just developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to bedigitaluk.com to find out more and get in touch. So going back to yourself, obviously you had a big change in your life. You've explained what you're doing, what your sort of raison d'etre is now. But looking back on your time at HP, obviously you had a very successful spell there over an 11.5-year period. What are you most proud of from your time there?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. Having taken this role on in 2017, I've really been involved in quite heavily the formation of how HPE's strategy has been reflected into what HPE's customers wanted to do. So I've worked a lot on building strategies, engaging with organizations and helping them realize the benefit of AI. It's fundamentally what I really enjoy doing, working with organizations, building out their strategies and helping them, get started with this complicated technology. So some of the things I really take away from HPE, great organization. They're doing some incredible stuff in the high performance compute space.
Absolutely.
Private cloud AI is an absolutely fantastic implementation. And when it comes to helping organizations get started on the journey, but really the next phase for me is moving into the digital transformation space. Absolutely getting in that broader, what are your outcomes you're trying to achieve? And I think if I were to reflect on my time at HPE, it would be some of those sort of engagements that I've had with organizations to really absolutely nail where they're going to go with AI and get involved in the engineering side of it and how they build out their models. And that's something I'm looking forward to really taking forward into the next role.
So what stands out for you then as something is going to benefit you, something you'll take forward to your new role that you learned at HPE?
I think I've always been an engineer. My background is computer science, masters in AI.
Once a techie, always a techie, Matt.
And HPE is absolutely an engineering organization.
Yeah, of course. You get that from them, the culture, the people. I mean, it's passionate about technology from first principles, isn't it?
So, one of the really great things that attracted me to I joined Hewlett-Packard and then went through the whole change as they became Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And that's one of the things.
When did that spin-off happen then?
8 years ago, I think.
Oh, okay. So it's quite early on in your time there then,
8 years ago. And I really am taking that forward into my new role at Servita around that. Absolutely, how we make it practical, achievable, implementable, and make sure that organizations achieve the business benefit. And some of the projects that Servita have been doing in the AI space are just absolutely phenomenal. They're doing some really, really interesting things with organizations in AI, right the way through some stuff they're doing in healthcare. It's some really interesting things around sports, right the way through into financial services. So they've got this absolutely great, and they are some of probably the smartest people I've worked with in my career. Incredible organization. They've embraced me arriving, with open arms, saying, yes, we're absolutely ready to take AI and globalize it across the organization and take it out and do some really interesting AI initiatives.
Do you have any, I wasn't going to ask you this, but since you brought it up, sports and AI, because I can see sport generally, certainly team sports and more strategic sports being absolutely revolutionized potentially, or certainly disrupted by AI, teams seeing patterns in their data, in their performance and their tactics, and just optimizing it on an ongoing basis. Have you got any observations of AI making an impact in sport, maybe from your time at HP or just generally?
So Servita have been doing some great things in sport.
Servita,
yes. Wearables. I think there's an initiative that Servita have got with Fitbit, where they've brought together and said, right, how can we analyze...
So for like team sports and stuff.
A broad variety of metrics coming in that allow you to make... So, if you think about the highest level of sporting engagements, having people who are at their absolute peak level of fitness based on all of the metric information that you've got about them and sending them out on the pitch at exactly the right time is critical.
Yeah, absolutely,
and I think we're seeing this across all sporting disciplines. I know Hewlett-Packard Enterprises big in Formula One, and they've been absolutely doing some incredible things with the Formula One teams to make sure that when the car goes out there, it's absolutely configured in the right kind of way. They've run the most algorithmic techniques that they can associated with car performance.
Yeah.
I think we could see probably as we start to go out into the future, we start thinking about simulations. So how can we bring players into a digital simulation world?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
so you can test tactics and ways of playing through digital twins, essentially, in a virtual game. Wow. Okay.
So I think if you go back to EA Sports, I think EA Sports have back in like 2018, they predicted the winners of the World Cup. 2018, I'm not a football guy. We've seen this ability to run simulations in virtual worlds that have got pretty big mechanisms of predicting outcomes, especially AI is based on probabilistic mathematics. So the sporting world is all about probability.
Yeah, of course.
Being able to model that at a pretty macro level really is going to be game changing. Yeah. And I think it's going to have a pretty significant impact on all sports at a professional level. Yeah. And it's going to be I think a pretty big game changer.
Yeah, well, hopefully the Welsh rugby team will get a good AI guy. Maybe you can go and help them.
So, my stepdad's Welsh, so yes.
I think you mentioned
we do have a good degree of banter about the rugby. So it's good seeing you on the way up.
Well, as a Welshman, I don't want to talk about rugby at the moment. It's been a rough couple of years, but I'm sure we'll be back. But maybe this is the stimulus to get them back. Let's talk about safety, Matt, okay? This is a really important topic right now. I'm certainly not alone in being a little bit nervous about the next couple of years, given the speed and just the sheer pace of innovation. And let me just give you an idea of what I'm most concerned about is capitalism is playing out, okay? And that's fine. I'm a capitalist. We got Anthropic, OpenAI, Meta, Google, all the giants are all competing for this sort of AI supremacy and having the best model, having the best agentic AI platform or whatever it is. But capitalism is competitive inherently, and safety may be taking a bit of a backseat potentially if we're not careful. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong with this, isn't there? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think firstly, the thing is, AI can make a lot of bad decisions really quickly. That's one of the fundamental challenges we've got.
At scale. Yeah.
Yes. However, I think we are seeing legislation. There's been some proposed legislation here in the UK about the formation of an AI authority, creating some sandbox environments. We've got the EU AI Act, which I think has got some challenges going forward. It's a very complicated piece of legislation to
The problem is technology moves quickly, AI especially, and legislation and government moves slowly. So it's going to be out of date in a year, So
we are seeing governments now gearing up towards this. And I think in terms of the pace of innovation, if we look at the TikTok between language models, 165 days or something, and that assumes you're looking at one language model.
Yeah.
If you start looking across all of them, the pace of change is absolutely phenomenal.
Sure.
Ultimately, are we going to be able to change that dynamic? I don't know whether or not we are. The innovator in me says, well, surely we should be continuing to drive the bounds of what we can and to make sure that we have the greatest capabilities available.
Of course.
We then need to make sure that we have the relevant ethical frameworks. And this is a bit, I think, that we're possibly missing in some of the really innovative organizations, the ethical frameworks, because the innovator in me says, should we innovate? Yes. The pragmatist in me says, just because we can
doesn't mean we should.
Should we?
Yeah.
And I don't think we have enough people who have a pragmatic approach to say, just because we can, should we? And I think we should also look about where this type of technology is being implemented in organizations and at what kind of scale and whether or not they're actually getting the right kind of benefit from it ultimately out the back based around what they're implementing. So come back to start with a real business problem and work back
from there. Yeah, no, that's very well said. So we did loosely talk about this earlier on, about this story which emerged a week or two ago of the Anthropic engineer getting blackmailed by a large language model who read his emails. For the listeners who didn't catch it, I think the model read said engineer's emails and then blackmailed him to out his extramarital affair if it shut that model off. The story appeared on a number of reputable sites. I know we've got maybe it was probably sensationalized, but it does make you wonder if models are blackmailing humans now with things like that. That's pretty scary, isn't it?
I think we've seen a number of sensationalist stories coming out quite recently. We've seen other ones, engineers absolutely adamant that models have become sentient. And so I think one of the things that we're seeing in the press is there's sort of a lot of jumping on sensationalist stories.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, AI is really complicated predictive mathematics.
Of course.
Language models are very complicated next word predictors.
Yeah.
So applying that kind of humanistic behavior to them, potentially we need the press and commenters to have some practical reality about what is or isn't happening in the space. And I do work with, PhD researchers and data scientists, and they're incredibly passionate people. And I have seen them get very close to specific implementations, and they do start to see some things that aren't necessarily there, which is why, in a business context, you need to have that step back to say, actually, is this going to achieve the right kind of business benefit? Or actually, is this model trying to blackmail you, or did you subconsciously create that by the way that you've asked it questions? So you've zeroed in to a statistical distribution where
you're so immersed in this stuff, aren't you, that you are going to now and again have a bit of a I'm like a mirage. It's like, do you know what I mean? You're going to see things that are not there, sort of thing.
Absolutely. So
that's an interesting take.
Practical background, and this is why I think we need sort of educated business leaders to understand, right, okay, it's great that you've got a model that is going to perform like this. However, when I implement it into my business setting, is it going to drive me the right kind of value?
Yeah.
And we see this with an uptick in performance metrics. If I look in my laboratory, if I've created in a lab and it's performing with a specific level of performance, it's F1 harmonic, then if I look at that, is that good enough? Am I willing to take the level of risk associated with it not performing at a certain level? Or do I need to uptick it? Do I need to bring in more data? Can I look at the statistical distribution of that data? Give you a different example. If we see, everyone's talking about using AIs to code.
Yeah.
Most algorithms are looking at existing places on the internet where people ask coding questions. If you look at those places, Stack Overflow, for example, most of the code on Stack Overflow is code that doesn't work. So that means because I'm asking a question, I'm putting some code onto Stack Overflow and saying, this doesn't work. And lots of people are giving examples which aren't necessarily right. So if I have 10 examples, I've got one that's right. Statistically, that is at the wrong end of the curve. So if I'm training my algorithm here, I'm training it on poor quality code, not high quality code.
Of course. Yeah.
And we're seeing this manifest in other areas as well. If you don't understand the significance of a statistical distribution, what can appear to be high quality data because of the curse of dimensionality can actually end up being a poor distribution, a poor representation of your data. And the algorithm, because it's based on probabilistic mathematics, will zero in to the peak of the curve, which might not necessarily be where you want it to derive its data or derive information from.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting take. I heard that it was either Stack Overflow or GitHub, something like 85% of the code on there is AI generated already. But then again, I suppose it's easy to create AI generated code at scale, isn't it? So
yes, very much so.
But yeah, so just going back to the safety thing, you mentioned when we last spoke, I think, about trust and transparency. So I'm just wondering, in terms of your new role, what are you saying to your customers in order to instill a culture of transparency and safety first in terms of adopting AI technology?
So I talk to organizations. So I think there are lots and lots of routes into the AI journey. That's probably the first thing. What's your strategy? Have you got a strategy? And your strategy breaks down into a number of major streams that you need to kick off. You need streams that cover trustworthy AI.
Sure.
But what's your operating model? How are you going to organizationally structure yourself? How are you going to understand which AI initiatives that you want to go forward with? Do you want to do AI or Gen AI? Because they tackle different problem spaces, different use cases, and have different paths to production.
Yeah.
How are you tackling your data? What tech stack are you going to put in place? How do you engage with the people in your organization?
So you start from the beginning, basically, then, yeah?
Some organizations already have some frameworks in place.
Yeah.
And it might well be that a lot of organizations already have governance. Organizations already have views around how they're implementing trustworthiness across other things they're doing. Lots of organizations have AI projects or initiatives already. AI is a very, very broad term. So it might well be that they're using machine learning already.
Yeah.
So they have some of these things in place.
Yeah.
So it is about working out, benchmarking where you are from a maturity perspective and whether or not these things need a little uplift or a lot of uplift, or whether or not they don't exist and need creating. And I think that's when you talk about this sort of AI piece. It's not about building an algorithm and deploying an algorithm. If you're going to do it successfully, there's a lot of things that you need to wrap around that to make it accepted in your organization.
Yeah.
Make sure that you've got the right class balances in your data. You're mitigating bias. You're leveraging your tech stack in the right way.
Yeah.
You've got the right partner ecosystem of people who understand how to do this stuff. You've got governance in place. You've got an operating model. You've built business cases. All of these things, if you start off on the right footing, you'll absolutely be successful.
Yeah, for sure.
Creating deployable AI systems.
Yeah, I think what I've noticed is that a lot of organizations may not have a conscious directive or strategy to implement AI capability. But in terms of their IT estate, obviously AI capability is emerging within that estate. You know what I mean? It's not unbeknown to them, but nonetheless, it's just natural progression of these products. I'm just wondering, from an asset management standpoint, how would you suggest CTOs keep track of this stuff to ensure that their data isn't training other companies' models or whatever else? You know what I mean? So how do you keep hold of your assets and manage them from an AI standpoint?
Absolutely. I think having proper data controls in place, data loss prevention, making sure that you're using it in the right kind of way. If you are engaging with organizations to collaborate on the construction of an AI, you need teaming agreements. You need to understand who owns intellectual property. All of these kind of challenges you need to factor in the commercial engagement models that you're going to run.
Yeah.
Because AI, talked about this all the time, AI is a team sport. It's about having the right collection of people collaborating together to ultimately drive business benefit.
Yeah.
One of the great things about Servita is we're an absolute catalyst. We've got a great ecosystem, and we can bring in the relevant stakeholders to make these initiatives successful.
Sure.
So yes, having a good solid grip over the assets that you've got deployed, including those data assets, is going to be of paramount importance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Skills. I wanted to talk to you about that. So you brought this up earlier on. There's obviously this stuff is moving so quickly. There's obviously a dearth of talent around to support this type of various parts of the AI transition journey. How do you think organizations are going to be able to keep up with the technology that they're adopting and implementing, especially from a governance and safety standpoint? What are you saying to organizations to ensure their workforce are suitably skilled to support the new technology they're implementing?
I think that comes across multiple dimensions. So firstly, there's kind of like a base level understanding. So if you're going to drive a car, you don't necessarily know how the engine works, but you do need either partners that you can work with or skills in your existing organization who do. You need to maintain it. What happens if it breaks? It needs fixing. All of these kind of things. So most people in an organization are going to be AI users. So they do need some foundational knowledge, especially if they're going to start to use generative AI, because they need to ask the right questions. Of course, asking the right questions gets better answers, but you don't need to know ultimately how retrieval augmented generation works, how language models work, how tokenization works, how all of the different AI algorithms operate. But you do need some capability in that space, because if you've got a problem, you need to choose the right technique to tackle that problem.
Sure.
And that's where I definitely see that there is a gap from a skills perspective. And it goes all the way through, right the way from this sort of broad education across your ecosystem. So I think there's a couple of ways of doing that. One is from board level down, get leaders in organizations to understand where AI can play a role, what type of problems that you can address with AI, so that when these leaders find these problems, they know the right kind of tools to bring in.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I think there's an augmentation play as well, which is you can go on the AI journey all on your own. It's tough. There's loads of lessons that you'll learn, and you will arrive with an AI implementation, possibly a bit battered, fallen on some banana skins, swum through some moats, all of that kind of good stuff. Or you engage with an organization like Servita, where we absolutely know how to avoid all of those pitfalls and get successful deployments in that map against business problems. But it is all about driving all of that through the organization. And when you start thinking about AI initiatives, it's a team sport. Make sure that you've got some diversity of thought. Make sure that you've got some people with the right kind of skill and those who understand your business and your business domain data, as well as those people who can bring in the technology-based skills, because it's one of the major areas where it's such an overlap between some of the disciplines that we've seen from IT, some of the disciplines we've seen from computer science, because they're slightly different, combined with some of the business knowledge, with also some of the data science style capabilities.
Yeah, no, very well said. I think there's loads of bits to tackle there, but I wanted to come back to the skills part. I'm doing a talk tomorrow at London South Bank University to a load of students, and I know, Matt, you've got children who are potentially entering the jobs market soon. So the question I want to ask you is, if there's any young people listening to this, or actually people who want to change careers of any age, if you are looking to work or maybe capitalize on this explosion of interest and the proliferation of AI capability within business and government and so on and so forth, what sort of emerging careers do you think, or emerging vocations will likely pick up speed over the next couple of years? We talked about AI ethics, I think is probably one.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a lot of prompt engineering courses and around things at the moment. What ones really stand out for you as say to a young person, if you get into this line of work, if you're interested in that type of thing, I think there's going to be jobs in the future with that, for those type of skills.
I think we're going to see an emerging need for somebody who understands business problems and how to translate them into ways that algorithms can implement them.
Right.
So this is the formation between...
Well, that's like a business analyst type skill set then, is it?
With prompt engineering.
Yeah, sure.
So we've heard of vibe coding.
Yeah, of course.
So vibe coding,
marketing, vibe is
it's the latest one,
the
latest trend.
Yeah.
However, you still need to ask and formulate your questions in the way that you get the right outcome. I'll give you an example. If you wanted to build a CRM system, you can't just turn around to an AI and say, write me a CRM system.
Yeah.
You need to understand at a granular level of detail what you want it to do.
Of course.
What you need it to build, how it's going to build
it may not need to be a CRM. It may need to be something bigger than that, like an ERP plus,
Yes. So some of that beyond, so this is sort of like the creative side meets the business analyst, meets the prompt engineer.
Yeah.
And I think these are roles that are going to start emerging where you can have somebody who can speak to a business person or understand business problems, analyze them to a degree that they understand how to turn that business problem into the logic that you need, and then turn that into an effective prompt to go through a vibe coding style process where the algorithm is creating the code that you need. I still think we've got a way to go with vibe coding, by the way, because most of the stuff that I get out of algorithms, old school mainframe programmer, it's not quite what I want. It doesn't quite work, or it makes use of some libraries that I hadn't heard of before, and whether or not I want to bring those into my enterprise organization might not be the way that I wanted to tackle a problem. But absolutely, I can see AI is playing an increased productivity role with developers. And I can see this, if anything, I almost see the role of the developer, which is somebody who picks up lots of bits and stitches them together, probably translating into this business analyst meets prompt engineering. The programmer is the person who's going to be writing the underlying algorithms into code. So much more technically focused. So I actually see it's the developer role that needs to move up, and probably the programmer role that needs to move closer to the technology, with AI filling the gap in between.
I mean, with most, we talked about this in our last conversation, I'm sure, but, with every technology innovation through history, going back to the Luddites or going even back a lot further than that, there's generally been a net gain in jobs, hasn't there?
Yes.
Do you think that's the case? It does feel different this time, I'll be honest with you. And funnily enough, it's coming for the white collar, not the blue collar workers, which is different to normal. I mean, there are lots of differences, obviously, there always are. But what's your general forecast? Are we looking at a net gain in jobs for humans, or are we all going to be on universal credit in 2 or 3 years?
I think the analysis shows that it will fundamentally shift the job landscape. The analysis says that overall there will be a net increase in jobs.
Okay.
Which will outweigh. So yes, so I like to be optimistic about these things. So, but you're talking, I think it will get rid of a significant volume of jobs, and then it will create a small 10% uptick. What that does mean is that, and I think fundamentally this is right, if you don't have any AI skill today, the chances of you going into this new job paradigm are very low. So you need to be AI native. You need to have an understanding. You don't need to know how the algorithms work or anything along those lines, but you need to have a broad understanding of what the technology does. How to, basic things like how to write a good prompt. These kind of skills, because it's not just a case of writing one line.
It blows my mind how so many people are still not using AI for more things because they don't really get how to prompt properly. It's just crazy to me. But there's still a lot of people like that. Most people are probably like that, aren't they?
I think over the next few years, we'll see people having a greater interaction with AI or generative AI, specifically on a more regular basis. And I think the people who are kind of in the AI world will still use AI techniques to find hidden patterns in data, and then expose that through generative AI techniques, which users will consume. And I also think as we start to see agentic workflow increase in the probabilistic nature of it, because at the minute you're timesing probabilities together, so it's not a deterministic outcome, which is what people are expecting. As we start to see these workflows play out more generally, they will start to be able to achieve some fairly straightforward workflows that historically have been mandrolic, people driving them.
I'm just talking about this event then today. I can't believe we've gone through 45 minutes already. What are you most excited about? The day and a half in front of us, or maybe have you enjoyed anything this morning? What are you looking to get out of this event?
I think it's a fantastic event. I've been coming here since 2018. I think this is
every year since then?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Every year that it's run.
It's only my third time. It's my third time.
Every year that it's run. I think they did one. They did.
They stopped it for 1 or 2 years.
Only one. I think I did come. But yes, every year the buzz gets better.
Oh, it's crazy this year, isn't it?
People coming along, more people every year. I'm part of the AI Ambassadors chapter for 2025. And I've really seen the conference grow. It's become very how we share, how we collaborate, how we grow this discipline. When I was asked why I wanted to become a member of the chapter 6-9 months ago, I said, there's a small quorum of people who've been doing this for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And the discipline itself has exploded massively.
Of course.
And we have a fiduciary responsibility to help those people who are joining the industry more recently to understand how to do it in a sustainable, responsible, maintainable, supportable way that ultimately achieves the benefit of AI globally. And this conference is an absolutely fantastic way of achieving that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. I mean, it's an incredible atmosphere here today, and I'm sure it'll be the same tomorrow. I was a bit disappointed Jensen wasn't here, but I listened to a bit of his speech on the live feed, and it was fantastic. But I have to say, there's some incredible speakers, across the 2 days. And it's a brilliantly run event. And it's fantastic. Anything in particular you're excited about? Are you signed up for any talks or anything that you're looking forward to?
If anything, I've only been to a couple because I've been so busy sort of talking to people.
Chatting to me and getting tech set up.
Yes. Well, literally, I'm walking around upstairs and people are stopping me and saying hello. So it's been fantastic from that perspective, bumping into people. I have a few sessions this afternoon. It's great to see some of the tech giants here.
Yeah, all of them are here, aren't they?
Coming to talk about some of the initiatives that they're doing. And also, the one that I really like is we've got customers who are on stage saying, this is what we did, this is how we did it, these were the successes, these were the challenge points, the sessions on this is how we built governance. So we've moved into people sharing their knowledge about what they're doing to absolutely make the next wave of AI be hugely successful.
Yeah, fantastic. So we finished last time. I asked you, what are you most excited about in relation to AI? You obviously answered that question. Has anything, since then, anything that's popped up on your radar that you're really excited about? Any startups or tools or anything like that? What is occupying your mind in terms of, in terms of AI, in terms like new technology and new stuff you've seen in the last year or so?
So I think probably last time you asked me this, I would have talked about microservices architectures, which I thought were fantastic. I thought it was the direction of travel. It was great to see Anthropic come out with MCP, the Model Context Protocol.
Yep, we were talking about that earlier when we
absolutely
were bit of a game changer, isn't it?
Went from an idea in like November, December last year through to being talked about at Google I/O.
Yeah,
I've seen IBM mention it today in terms of them building it into their tooling. So this is about how you keep context within multiple agents collaborating.
Sure.
There are others, there's agent to agent and a number of other things which are all about sort of the communication side. This is busting the field wide open.
Yeah.
It really is going to be the next evolutionary step as to how we get proper agentic AI workflows beyond the point where they are primitive, much more into the sort of next evolution where they can collaborate, they can achieve some absolutely incredible things. And that, I think, is going to be the big game changer. Everyone's talked about it. 2025 is the year of the AI agent.
Yeah, I think it is indeed.
2025 is the year that we'll talk about the AI
26
agent.
When we'll actually deploy it. Yeah.
Yes, will be when we start to deploy some in anger that absolutely achieve the right kind of business benefit for the average organization that isn't Google DeepMind.
Fantastic. Well, on that bombshell, I think it's been lovely talking to you, Matt, and I'll let you go and enjoy some of the talks and things. And obviously, you've got loads of people to catch up with. But thank you so much for talking to us. Awesome. It's been great to catch up. Where can people find you, keep tabs on what you're doing?
LinkedIn is a great place. Come and follow me on LinkedIn. I have posted a couple of videos. I will definitely post some more. I think there's a need for some primer stuff. So I'm going to go back to first principles and drop out some primer explainer videos as well as talking about explaining what the Model Context Protocol is and how it works and why it's relevant.
That would be fab. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to Be Digital UK to find out more and get in touch.